Give me my card case. It fell beside my shoe. I was handing it back.
My ex-wife slapped the older woman before anyone around us moved. When Vanessa raised her hand again, I caught her wrist. "Don't touch her again." Her eyes locked on mine.
You always needed an audience, Darius.
Around us, donors were already lifting their phones.
Security! Remove him!
The older woman reached for her pendant, and a tiny voice crackled from it. "Mrs. Bennett, can you hear me?"
I'm fine. Please stop fussing.
Then she looked toward Sloane. "My son Elliot will hear about this." Sloane's face changed. "Elliot?" Vanessa cut him off. "This woman stole from me, and my ex-husband attacked me." I released Vanessa's wrist. "I already chose my side." Vanessa smiled. "You're terminated, effective now. At 5 p.m. tomorrow, the new owners sign. By then, your name will be on a violence report, and you'll never work in this hotel again." They walked me out through the service corridor, past the linen carts and the ice machine I had heard rattle for almost 2 decades. The 2 guards beside me were men I had trained on emergency radio procedure. Neither of them looked at me. Vanessa followed us into the security office, and that was when I understood how much trouble I was in. She did not shout. She smoothed her pastel pink jacket, sat on the edge of the desk, and turned her phone recorder on with one thumb. Then she dictated in a calm, pleasant voice. "Guest theft accusation. Former employee became physically aggressive. Executive restrained." "I stopped you from hitting her," I said. She did not look up. "Then prove the part no one recorded clearly." She knew exactly what she was saying. Every phone in that ballroom came up after I already had her wrist. The only picture the world had was a big man in a Navy work jacket holding a smaller woman by the arm. The security supervisor slid my badge under a reader, and the little green light went red. 19 years of access, gone in the time it takes to sneeze. Vanessa stopped in the doorway. "The workplace violence investigation goes into the transition file. Grant Meridian's people will read it before they sign." Leon was waiting by the locker room, my older brother, still in his tool belt. He is an electrical foreman here, and he sits on the worker transition committee, which meant he had spent 2 months negotiating to keep people employed after the sale. "Tell me you're going to apologize," he said. "For what?" "Say you misread it. Say the lights were down." He lowered his voice. "Darius, we have people with kids. People 6 months from retirement. That signing tomorrow decides who keeps their job." "She hit a 70-year-old woman in the face." "And the only proof is your word against a vice president." He shook his head slowly, and I saw the thing he had been carrying since the divorce come up into his eyes. "You don't get to burn everybody's future because you hate your ex-wife." He walked out before I could answer. I opened my locker. Spare cables, meters, my navy blazer on a hanger for signing day, and standing there with a coil of cable in my hand, I saw the moment again. Vanessa had been wearing her wireless lavalier microphone when she slapped Ruth Bennett. Clipped to her collar for the donor remarks. The tiny green transmitter light had still been on. Our event system holds each microphone channel separately for a short window, not the mixed program feed, the raw individual channel. It sits in the archive until the automatic purge. Tomorrow afternoon, the system would run its transition backup cycle. Everything older would be wiped. I had until then to get a legitimate copy of the only recording in that building that heard everything. I did not go home, and I did not go near a server. I knew the passwords, and I knew the racks. I could have pulled that channel myself and had the truth in my hand in 20 minutes. And it would have been worthless. A terminated employee touching a system after his access is revoked is not a witness. He is a suspect who broke in. So I called the 24-hour compliance line, and at 7 the next morning the officer called me back. I did not ask for the recording. I asked for 3 things. Preserve the event audio. Freeze the isolated microphone channel before the backup cycle. Appoint a neutral technician to handle it, not me. Mr. Cole, a complaint was filed last night naming you. That makes you an involved party. I can't take a preservation request from you, and you are not to access hotel systems for any reason. Vanessa had filed first, while I was still walking to my locker. She had not just accused me. She had put herself on the side of the process and me outside it. And now the man who understood that building better than anyone was the one man forbidden to touch it. At 8:30, I drove to the clinic where they had kept Ruth Bennett overnight for observation. She sat in the waiting area in a gray cardigan, reading a folded newspaper, ankles crossed like a woman waiting for a train she was not worried about missing. There was a bruise coming up along her cheekbone. That was all. "You look worse than I do," she said. "I've had a longer night." She set the paper down. "They told me you lost your job." "You didn't fire me." "No, but it happened because I bent down for a card case." She said it plainly, not as an apology fishing for comfort. "Are you going to fight it, or let it sit?" "I'm going to prove what happened." She studied me a second longer than was comfortable, then nodded once, like a woman filing something away. The brass pendant was back around her neck on its navy cord. Dull metal, an oval the size of a thumb, scratched all over, like something out of a jewelry box nobody had opened in 50 years. "My husband made that shell," she said when she caught me looking. "The one they sold me was white plastic, ugly. I refused to wear it, so he took it apart and put the pieces inside brass." She touched it without looking down. "He's been gone a long time now." Then she asked the question that got past me. "Does Vanessa always know exactly where to hurt you?" I answered before I decided to. "She was my wife for 11 years, and she ran compliance before public affairs. There's an old work record with my name on it. If she puts it in front of the right people, nobody will believe a word I say about anything." Ruth waited. She did not push, which was somehow harder than being pushed. "Not today," I said. Grant Meridian was not buying one hotel. They ran properties up and down the coast, and when the sale closed at 5, the personnel files locked and transferred. A violence finding follows a badge number through a whole company. I would become a name that made hiring managers at every convention hotel within 300 miles say they would call me back. At 20 minutes to 10, a former co-worker sent me a link with no message attached. A local business blog had posted a story about the reception. Executive assaulted while protecting elderly guest from theft dispute. They had not printed my name yet. What chilled me was the language. Guest theft accusation. Physically aggressive. Executive restrained. Word for word out of the report she had dictated in front of me 12 hours earlier. She was not defending herself. She was publishing herself. And once enough people repeat a sentence, it stops being a claim and becomes the record. Keeping my job was no longer the objective. The objective was to preserve one true thing before her version turned official. Leon called a little after 10 and told me to meet him behind the loading dock. He was eating an early lunch out of wax paper and did not offer me half, which is how I knew he was still angry. "I read the incident report," he said. "And?" "It says you shoved her." "Leon, did I shove her?" "I wasn't standing where you were standing." "You were 40 feet away and you watched them walk me out." "Was anybody holding an ice pack for Vanessa? Was anybody calling a nurse?" He wrapped his lunch back up slowly. He is 9 years older than me, and he has never liked admitting a thing out loud before he has chewed on it privately. "Last night the summary said restrained," he said. "This morning it says shoved. Reports don't grow on their own." "No," he agreed, "they don't." He did not say he believed me. But 40 minutes later he sent me a photograph of a screen. Leon has access to the transition dashboard because his crew keeps the power and the racks alive. He did not pull footage or touch a file. He looked at the audit log, which is only a list of who asked for what and when. At 9:42 the night before, Vanessa's office had submitted a media request, public relations export, and the export had a start point, beginning after the confrontation started. It did not prove she slapped anyone. It proved somebody sat down within an hour of the incident and chose exactly where the story would begin. My phone rang while I was still looking at it. Ruth. "Is the signing still happening?" she asked. 5 o'clock, I said, and then sat up straighter. "How do you know there's a signing?" There was a small pause. Amusement, maybe. Hotels tell you a great deal when people think you are too old to matter. She said goodbye before I could ask what she meant. I did not have long to wonder, because before noon Vanessa made her next move, and it was not aimed at me at all. She called my brother into a private meeting. Leon told me in the stairwell afterward, flat, the way he reports a job to a client. She did not mention me for 10 minutes. She talked about the buyer wanting a permanent chair for the worker liaison role after closing. A paid position, a seat in the room where retention decisions get made. She said she had recommended him. Then she slid a page across the table. Guaranteed retention terms for the whole electrical crew. 11 men and 2 women who had been losing sleep for 2 months. She never once said the words, "Betray your brother." She said, "I need adults in that room tomorrow." Leon understood her perfectly. So did I. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I would see her at 5 o'clock. I could not push him. I had spent 2 years being the man who would not explain himself. I had no right to demand the benefit of the doubt now. So I went at it from the only direction still open. I could not order a preservation, but the current board governed the property until 5 o'clock, and a sitting board chair could sign a request to freeze the accessibility archive, where those isolated channels live. And exactly 1 board chair had been standing on that platform, 20 feet away, looking right at us when it happened. At 12:30, I put on a clean shirt, drove back to the hotel I had been thrown out of, and asked for Howard Sloan. Sloan met me in a conference room off the lobby with the door open, which told me he wanted witnesses. He is in his late 60s, the kind of man who has spent 30 years making sure nothing lands on him. "Mr. Cole, I've been advised not to speak with you." "Then don't speak. Listen for 2 minutes. Why should you risk this sale over a fight between two divorced people? You shouldn't. I'm not asking you to take my side. I'm asking you to stop a recording from being deleted." Then I explained the archive. Every wireless microphone in that ballroom is stored as its own channel, apart from the mix, because the hotel keeps clean feeds for guests who use assisted listening. Nobody edits those. They sit there until the system wipes them, and the wipe was that afternoon. "I'm barred from the system," I said. "I don't want it. I want a neutral technician to pull that channel with compliance holding it, and I want it done before 3 o'clock. "And if it says what she says it says?" "Then it says that, and you'll never hear from me again." Then he said something I did not expect. "The buyer's attorneys asked for a clean process this morning." That was the whole reason he signed. Not justice, paperwork. The buyer's lawyers wanted no open disputes with missing evidence attached to a property they were about to own, and a chairman who let a recording get wiped hours before closing would be a chairman with a problem. He signed the preservation request at 11 minutes to 1. Before I left, I asked the question that had been sitting in me all night. "Mr. Sloan, when Mrs. Bennett said the name Elliot, your face changed. Why?" He capped his pen very carefully. "Because I know an Elliot involved in this deal." "That's not an answer. It's the one you get." Leon was waiting by my truck with a page folded in his shirt pocket. "The export log," he said, "with my initials on the pull, so nobody can say it came out of nowhere." That page could cost him his committee seat if Vanessa made an issue of who was reading dashboards. "Leon, I'm not taking your side." He said it fast, like he had practiced it. "I'm protecting my crew from a dirty process. If she'll shape a clip on day 1, she'll shape a retention list on day 30. What does she have on you? An old record. What kind of record?" The compliance technician came out the service door and waved at me right then, and I was so relieved that I took the exit like a coward. "Not now." Leon's face closed like a garage door. He walked off without another word, and I told myself I would explain later, when it would not sound like a confession squeezed out under pressure. That decision cost me more than anything Vanessa ever did. The technician's name was Priya, and she took the seal seriously enough to make me stand behind a taped line while she worked. That was correct, and I told her so. She isolated the channel and put it on the room speaker. 19 years in that building, and I had never once been afraid of a sound. There it was. Ruth's polite voice. Vanessa's voice, sharp on the word open. Then a flat, ugly crack, unmistakable, the sound of an open hand on a face, and a small, startled breath from a woman in her 70s. Then my own voice, low. "Don't touch her again." Then Vanessa calling security. And then something I had not known was there. Her collar microphone was still transmitting when she stepped aside with the security supervisor, and under the crowd noise her voice came through close and quiet and perfectly clear. "Start anything you release after he takes my wrist." Priya stopped the playback. "That's your case," she said. I should have walked out and let her finish the seal. Instead, I thought about the backup cycle, and about everything in that building running on systems Vanessa's office could file requests against. And I heard myself say, "Give me 2 minutes." I had an authorized drive in my toolbox, company issue, tagged with my badge number. I plugged it in and pulled a second copy before the seal was closed. Mr. Cole, don't do that. If this disappears, I have nothing. That's why we seal it. I did it anyway. 90 seconds. It felt like ordinary caution. I drove to the clinic to tell Ruth. She listened with her hands folded, and when I finished, she did not smile. "You found the truth," she said. "Don't ruin it by needing to own it." I thought she was being poetic. By 2 o'clock, I had 4 things. A certified copy of the microphone channel, sealed by compliance. The export log with my brother's initials on it. A preservation request signed by the board chairman, and Leon, still angry, who had now told 2 people the incident report changed overnight. Sloan called an emergency review for 3 o'clock, 2 hours before the signing. Legal counsel, compliance, the board's audit member, and both parties. I sat in my truck and let myself feel something I had not felt since the ballroom. Relief. Play it, and this ends. Leon called at 2:20. He had canceled a private dinner with her transition team, a table they had booked for after the close. "What kind of person books the celebration before the investigation?" he said. "That's not the same as saying I trust you." "I know." Ruth said she would come. I told her she did not have to sit in a room with the woman who hit her, and she said in the driest voice I have ever heard from a woman with a bruise on her cheek, "Young man, I have sat through worse for less." Then, at 3:10, I passed Vanessa in the corridor outside the boardroom. She had heard about the preservation request. I know because she stopped walking when she saw me, and for 1 full second, her face did something I had not seen in 11 years of marriage. The smoothness went out of it. Then it was gone, and she smoothed her jacket and smiled at me the way she smiles at donors. "Good," she said. "Let 'em bring everything." I stood there and felt the relief drain out through my shoes, because I had expected fear and I had gotten permission. My phone buzzed. A message from her, sent while she was 15 feet away from me with her back turned. "Bring your little recording. I'll bring yours." The boardroom smelled like coffee and floor polish. 9 people around a long table, and my whole life on a sealed drive in front of the compliance officer. Priya played the channel. The room heard the slap. The audit member closed her eyes. Sloane's jaw tightened, and when Vanessa's own voice came up under the crowd noise, a man from legal put down his pen. I had won. For about 11 seconds, I had won. Vanessa did not deny it. She waited until the recording ended, folded her hands, and asked one question. "Who copied this?" The silence changed shape. "Compliance sealed it," Priya said. "That isn't what I asked." Before the seal was completed, did anyone connect a personal storage device to that workstation? Priya is an honest woman. That is why I had wanted her. Mr. Cole made a backup copy. I advised him not to. Vanessa nodded slowly, like a woman hearing disappointing news about someone she cared for. Then she read, from a forensic consultant her office had retained that morning, that the man introducing the audio had held administrator-level knowledge of these systems for 19 years, that the evidence had passed through a device in his personal possession before chain of custody was complete, that authenticity could not be independently certified. She never said the recording was fake. She never had to. She only had to make it something the board could not rely on today, and today was all that mattered. "I simply don't believe this body should make a finding on evidence handled by the accused," she said. It was reasonable. That was the horror of it. On the other side of that table, I might have said the same thing. Then she reached into the folder again. "Since we are discussing character," she played a voicemail. 3 years old. My voice, thick and shaking, from the worst week of the divorce. "One day people are going to see what you really are." Out of that kitchen and that year, it did not sound like a man breaking. It sounded like a threat with a long fuse. Then she slid one sheet of paper down the table, past legal, past compliance, and stopped it in front of my brother. An old maintenance work order, a completion timestamp. In the authorization field, my name. Leon read it twice. Then he looked up with an expression I will carry the rest of my life, because it was not anger. It was a man finding out he had been protected in a way he never agreed to. "You told me there was nothing else," he said. I had 1 second to answer, and everyone in that room watched me not have it. He put the page down, stood, and walked out. The board did not clear me and did not condemn me. They did the third thing, which is worse than both. They postponed. The audio would go to an outside firm. The violence allegation would stay open in the transition file that transferred at 5 o'clock. And since I was under review, I was barred from the signing floor. Vanessa kept her role, her seat, and her afternoon. I had walked in with evidence, credibility, my brother, and access. I walked out with none of it, and not one piece of that was her doing. I copied a file I did not need to copy, because some part of me still believed I was the only man in that building who could be trusted with the truth. And I lost Leon because I told him half of something again. Sitting on the loading dock stairs at 3:30, I finally understood the trap. Every path I knew ran through systems I had touched. As long as my hands were on the proof, my hands were the argument, and I could not ask anyone to believe me while I was hiding the one thing that made her story sound true. I found Leon in the electrical shop, coiling cable he did not need to coil. "Don't," he said. "I'm not here to explain it. I'm here to tell you all of it." He kept coiling, but he did not tell me to leave. So I told him. 8 years ago, our father had a stroke on a Tuesday afternoon. Leon was on shift. He left without clearing it with anybody, because a man does, and he stayed at that hospital 2 days. There was an open work order under his name that had to be closed inside a 24-hour window. Nothing about that job was unsafe. The panel was tested, the tests were real, they passed, and I never touched a number that had anything to do with anyone's safety. What was missing was a completion entry inside a policy window. And that year, after 2 bad quarters, attendance and delay violations were termination offenses. They had fired 3 people that spring to prove they meant it. So I opened the record and changed the completion time. I told myself I would go back and correct it with a supervisor note. I never went back. Vanessa found it 4 months later in a compliance audit. She never reported it, and she never used it. She kept a copy and let me know she had a copy. And after that, whenever we argued, I could feel it in the room like a third person. Leon had stopped coiling somewhere in the middle. "I did it for you," I said. "That doesn't make it right. I falsified a company record. That's the truth. and it stays the truth no matter why I did it. You let me think I got away with it clean. Yes, for 8 years. Yes. He set the cable down. Why not just tell me? Because then you'd have had to decide what to do about it. I decided it was easier if I carried it and you never knew. I heard how it sounded. I've been calling that generosity for 8 years. It's the same thing I did to my marriage, and the same thing I did to you yesterday in the parking lot. He looked at the concrete a long time. He did not hug me, and he did not say he forgave me. He is not built that way, and I had not earned it in 90 seconds. He said, "What do we do now?" Not you. We. That was all I got, and more than I deserved. I have to stop trying to prove my file is real, I said. She's right. Everything I touch is contaminated. I need evidence neither of us could ever get near. And standing in that shop, I heard it again. Not the ballroom. A sound. A tiny voice out of a brass shell on a marble floor. "Mrs. Bennett, can you hear me?" I called Ruth and asked how the pendant worked. She explained it the way people explain an ordinary appliance. A hard impact, or a press of the button, opens a call to the monitoring center. Somebody comes on the line and asks if she is all right. The center records those calls and keeps them for quality and safety review. My mouth went dry. "Mrs. Bennett, after I handed it back to you, was the light still on?" "Yes." "For how long?" "For several minutes. The young man kept asking whether I wanted an ambulance, and I kept telling him I did not, and I'm afraid I was rather short with him." Several minutes. Vanessa had stood 8 feet from that woman's collar and given her instruction to the security supervisor. Not the hotel's recording, not mine. A private monitoring company 3 states away, with its own timestamp, no relationship to Harborline, no way for me to reach it, and no way on this earth for Vanessa Cole to edit it. But I could not request it. It was not my emergency and not my device, and if my name went near it, we were back where we started. Ruth had to do it herself. She called them at 10 minutes to 4, with me sitting beside her, not saying a word. The representative was kind and completely immovable. Yes, a call from that account existed. Yes, a certified copy could be released to the account holder. It required identity verification, assigned authorization, and supervisor processing. "How long?" Ruth asked. "Normally 1 business day, ma'am." "I need it in an hour." A pause. "I'll flag it as expedited. I can't promise." Then, brisk and routine, the way people say things that stop your heart. "And should we copy your emergency contact on file, Mr. Elliot Grant?" Ruth said, "That won't be necessary," and ended the call. I sat very still. I had spent 2 months looking at acquisition materials, with a photograph of a man named Elliot Grant on the cover. "Mrs. Bennett." "Wait until 5 o'clock," she said, and picked up her handbag. We had 1 hour, and 4 people who each had 1 job and something to lose. Ruth had to get the recording released. Leon had to confirm 2 timelines from the inside and decide whether he would say so in front of the people who sign his checks. Sloan had to keep the session open for a procedural challenge. And I had to decide what to do about my own name. Vanessa called Leon at 20 past 4. He put it on speaker, standing in a stairwell with his hand flat on the wall. She was warm. She asked how his crew was holding up. She said the retention language would be locked at closing, and she wanted him at that table. Then, "I understand you've been pulling dashboard reports. I'd hate for the committee chair to look like a man who turned a personnel dispute into a spectacle. Buyers notice who is steady." "Is that a question?" "It's an observation." She hung up. Leon stayed against that wall a while. "She just told me the job's mine until I open my mouth. You know what that is for a foreman my age?" "I know exactly what it is." He did not tell me what he would do, and I made myself not ask. Then the signing agenda came to my phone from a friend in banquets, and I saw how completely she meant to finish this in front of an audience. A new item, Item 4, Workplace Violence and Integrity Statement. Before Elliot Grant ever sat down, she was going to stand up in front of the board, the workers, the media, and the buyers, and close me. The edited clip, the voicemail, the work order. She was not trying to win an argument with me anymore. She was getting an institution to adopt her version in public, so that afterward it would not be a claim, it would be minutes. At 4:35, Ruth called the monitoring center back. Verification had cleared, authorization was accepted, the file was queued. It needed a supervisor to authenticate the release, and the supervisor was on another call. "How long?" I asked. He said soon. Soon. 25 minutes to 5, and my whole case was one word. So I did the only thing left that was mine to do. I sat in my truck with the laptop on the steering wheel and wrote a disclosure to the state board that certifies event and life safety supervisors. The work order, the date, the change I made, the reason I made it, and the fact that the reason did not excuse it. No request for leniency. I filed it at 4:41 and copied compliance, Sloan, and the board secretary, so it was in the record before Item 4 was ever read aloud. Leon watched me hit send. "You understand what that does," he said. "They can pull your credential. Today's mess might blow over. That won't." "Then why?" "Because if I'm going to stand in that room and ask people to believe the truth, I don't get to hide the part that embarrasses me." I closed the laptop. She's held that one page over my head for 8 years. I'd rather hand it to them myself. There was still one problem. I was under review, and board rules kept me off the signing floor. Sloan met us at the service entrance at 10 minutes to 5 and said so flatly, and said he was sorry, and meant it about half as much as he wanted to. "Then he comes as my guest," Ruth said. Sloan looked at that small woman in her gray cardigan with the bruise on her cheek, and he looked for a long moment. "The guest list is still under the current board's authority," he said at last, "until 5 o'clock. "Then we should hurry," Ruth said. The ballroom was full. Rows of chairs, the signing table on the platform, a screen behind it, the board along one side, the Grant Meridian executives up front. Workers stood at the back in uniform, coming off shift to watch their futures get decided. 2 reporters and a camera by the rear wall. Vanessa stood at the front in pastel pink, hair in its neat bun, tablet in hand, completely at home. I sat in the last row beside Ruth Bennett in a plain navy blazer as her guest. Leon sat at the worker table with his hands flat on the wood. Sloan opened the session, and at Item 4, Vanessa took the floor. She did not rant. I want people to understand that, because the dangerous ones never do. She spoke for 6 minutes in a calm, regretful voice, about the hotel's obligation to protect guests and staff. She played the donor clip, and there I was, 40 feet tall, a large man gripping a small woman's wrist while she said, "Remove him." She played my voicemail. She put the work order on the screen with my name in the authorization field and left it there. "This is not about one disagreement," she said. "It is about a pattern." 2 board members shifted toward her. Sloan said, "Mr. Cole, 5 minutes." I walked the whole length of that ballroom, and my legs did not feel like mine. I did not start with the slap. I turned to the screen with my own name on it. "That timestamp is real. I changed it." The room made a sound. Vanessa's chin lifted very slightly, and I knew exactly what she was thinking, because I had been married to her. He just did the work for me. 8 years ago, my father had a stroke," I said. "My brother left his shift for the hospital. There was an open work order under his name, a 24-hour window, and a policy that would have fired him. No safety test was altered. What I changed was a completion time, and I changed it so my brother would still have a job when our father died." I turned back to the board. "That was falsifying a record. There's no version of that sentence where I come out clean. I was protecting my brother. I was still wrong." At 4:41 this afternoon, I filed a full written report of it with the State Licensing Board. Compliance has a copy. Mr. Sloan has a copy. It was filed before this session opened, and I'll accept whatever they decide, including losing my supervisory credential. The room was very quiet. The page was still on the screen behind her, and it had stopped being a weapon and become a piece of paper. "How convenient," she said, and turned toward the worker table. "Leon, you're on the committee. Tell them how many times your brother has protected you." Leon stood up. He is not a talker. He kept his hands at his sides and spoke to the board, not to her. "Once," he said, "and I didn't know about it until an hour ago." He let that sit. "Now here's what I do know. Last night the incident summary said an executive was restrained. This morning it said shoved. Nobody added an injury. Somebody added a verb." He took the folded page out of his pocket. "At 9:42 last night, Miss Cole's office ordered a public relations export from the event system, set to begin after the confrontation started. I pulled that log myself, and my initials are on it. Nobody asked me to. And that lady in the back row has a bruise on her face that isn't in anybody's report." Vanessa said, very quietly, "Leon, think about the chair." "Then give it to somebody else," my brother said, and sat down. Nobody applauded. That is not what happens in a real room. There was silence, 1 reporter's pen, and 13 electricians at the back who understood exactly what he had just cost himself. Vanessa turned back to the board and made her last move, and it was a good one. "None of that establishes that I struck anyone," she said. "The only audio anyone has offered was handled by Mr. Cole, and it cannot be certified. So I'll ask the question this body should be asking." She looked straight at me. "Where is the evidence neither of you touched?" And the ballroom doors opened. Elliot Grant came in at 5 o'clock with 2 attorneys. Early 50s, gray at the temples, unhurried. Half the room stood Vanessa turned toward him with her hand already extending. He walked past her. Past the executives in the front row, up the aisle to the last row, and he crouched in front of the small woman in the gray cardigan, and I watched his face come apart. "Mom," he said, "why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. The night before, I had bent down for a card case beside a stranger's shoe and stopped my ex-wife from hitting an old woman, never once imagining that the old woman's son was the billionaire buying the building. Ruth put her hand on his cheek. "Because I wanted the truth to arrive before your name did." Elliot stood and looked at the screen, at the board, at Vanessa with her hands still half raised. Everyone in that ballroom waited for him to save me. I felt the whole room lean toward the rich man like a field of wheat. "My mother is a party to this incident," he said. "I will not decide it. If I decide it, every person in this room will always wonder what was bought." Vanessa's shoulders came down half an inch. Ruth's phone chimed in her hand. She looked at the screen, and then she looked at me, and she said, "Mr. Sloan, I've received something, and I'd like the room to hear it." The file came from a monitoring company in another state, released to its account holder, with a representative on speaker to state on the record what it was. The device. The time the call opened and closed. That the audio was continuous and unedited from their servers, not the hotel's system, not mine. Nothing anyone in that ballroom had ever been able to reach. Priya connected the audio, and Sloan said, "Play it." "Give me my card case." It fell beside my shoe. I was handing it back. "You opened it. I did not." Then that flat, ugly crack, close this time, right at Ruth's throat, and a startled breath. Somebody in the third row made a noise. A woman at the worker table put her hand over her mouth. My voice. "Don't touch her again." Vanessa's voice. "Security, remove him." The kind young man on the line asking Mrs. Bennet if she could hear him. And then, 40 seconds later, under the crowd, close and calm and unmistakable. "Start the clip after he grabs my wrist. Everything before that is noise." Nobody needed a lawyer to explain what they had just heard. Vanessa did not confess. She never did, all the way to the end. "That statement was about protecting guest privacy," she said. "We had an elderly guest in a distressing situation and phones everywhere. My concern was her dignity." Sloan said, "Then why does your written report state there was no earlier physical contact?" "The report reflected my understanding at the time." "You wrote it 11 minutes after the incident." "I was managing a crisis, Howard." "So the concern was her privacy," Sloan said, "and also your understanding, and also the crisis." She gave 3 answers to 2 questions, and the room heard all 3. That was the end of Vanessa Cole in that building. Not a breakdown, not a confession. Just a woman who had always chosen the version in front of people who had finally heard the original. Elliot Grant spoke once more, and only once. "The acquisition can continue," he said. "Her employment review cannot. Grant Meridian is not going to inherit a personnel finding assembled this way. Will require an independent ethics review before any transition authority transfers, and my office will have no part in conducting it." The board voted in 11 minutes. Vanessa was suspended from all transition authority pending investigation, and escorted out by two of the same men who had walked me out the night before. Based on the external recording, the violence allegation against me was found unsupported. They signed the acquisition at 22 minutes past 5. 4 days later, a letter came saying the violence allegation had been removed from my personnel file and from the transition record. The same week, the State Licensing Board opened a review of my disclosure. My attorney says the likely outcome is a temporary supervisory restriction and a reprimand on my certificate. It may be more. I signed the acknowledgement and mailed it back the day it came. Vanessa's investigation is still open. She is not in jail, and I never wanted her to be. She is out of the transition process, and every room she walks into now, somebody has already heard the recording. For a woman who built a life out of controlling the version, that is the heaviest thing that could have happened to her. Leon found me in the empty ballroom on Saturday morning, chairs stacked, carpet showing the dents where the signing table had been. "I'm still angry you never told me," he said. "You should be." He put his hands in his pockets and looked at the ceiling a while. "Coffee tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." That was all. It will take longer than an afternoon to fix 8 years, and I would not trust it if it went faster. Ruth came by that same morning for a scarf she had left in the coat room. The bruise had gone yellow at the edges. The brass pendant was at her throat on its navy cord. She saw me looking and touched it. "My husband always said this ugly little thing might save me one day." "It saved more than you," I said. She shook her head. "No, it recorded what you chose to do." Elliot Grant asked me one question before he flew out, whether I would stay on under the new ownership. No speech, no title, no number. I told him I would answer after the licensing review, because I am not going to take a job I might not be certified to hold. He said that was fair and shook my hand. I stood in that ballroom a minute after they all left, in the same spot where a woman bent down for a card case and my ex-wife raised her hand. I had spent years believing the truth only mattered if I could prove everyone else wrong. What I finally learned was harder. Sometimes the truth asks you to admit where you were wrong first. What would you risk to tell the truth if the person lying about you knew the one mistake you were most ashamed of?